Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times, a Prancing Pony podcast production. I'm the Man of the West, and it's time to keep Series 13 of the TTT going as we celebrate a milestone of sorts, beginning my 100th week with another Middle-earth Map Monday. Now, after spending the last 10 weeks in Northien, we finally made our way across the Anduin, after looking at Caer Andros and Osgiliath. We made a left at the crossroads, and we're now in the region of North Ithilien. Now, before we dive into the northern part of this region, which we encounter in the story first through the eyes of Frodo and Sam, let's get you set for the whole region, geographically speaking. In the Rivers and Beacon Hills of Gondor, found in the Nature of Middle-earth, we read about several place names in Gondor that are of pre-Númenórean origin rather than of Sindarin origin. One of those is the Hills of Emin Arnin, which we'll look at in 2 weeks when we visit South Ithilien. But that place in the text is where we get this nugget about the region as a whole. Arnin was the older name of the greater part of the region later called Ithilien. This was given to the narrow land between the Anduin and the Efelduath, primarily to the part between Caer Andros and the southern end of the Bend of Anduin, but vaguely extended north to the Nindalf and south towards the Poros. Now, of course, it was given the Sindarin name Ithilien after Elendil's son Isildur, Ithil being the Sindarin cognate of Quenya Isil, meaning moon. But the boundaries are the same. To the east, the Efelduath, the Mountains of Shadow. To the west, the Anduin. To the south, the river Poros, which joins the Anduin south of Pelargir. And then to the north, the Nindalf, or the Wetwang. The dividing line between North Ithilien and South Ithilien isn't clearly identified, but it is almost certainly the east-west road that travels from Osgiliath to Minas Ithil, or Minas Morgul. Now, as a whole, the region is sheltered from the east by the Efelduath and from the north by the Emin Muil, so it is open to the sea air from the south, creating a more Mediterranean climate than any region that we've seen before. And now, let's take a look at the sort of environment that climate has created. It's different than anything else we've encountered in The Lord of the Rings to this point. So they passed into the northern marches of that land that men once called Ithilien, a fair country of climbing woods and swift-falling streams. The night became fine under star and round moon, and it seemed to the hobbits that the fragrance of the air grew as they went forward. Later, before them as they turned west, gentle slopes ran down into dim hazes far below. All about them were small woods of resinous trees, fir and cedar and cypress, and other kinds unknown in the Shire, with wide glades among them, and everywhere there was a wealth of sweet-smelling herbs and shrubs. The long journey from Rivendell had brought them far south of their own land, but not until now in this more sheltered region had the hobbits felt the change of clime. Here, spring was already busy about them. Fronds pierced moss and mold. Larches were green-fingered. Small flowers were opening in the turf. Birds were singing. Ithilien, the garden of Gondor, now desolate, kept still a disheveled dryad loveliness. South and west it looked towards the warm lower vales of Anduin, shielded from the east by the Efelduath, and yet not under the mountain shadow. Protected from the north by the Emin Muil, open to the southern airs and the moist winds from the sea. Many great trees grew there, planted long ago, falling into untended age amid a riot of careless descendants. And groves and thickets there were of tamarisk and pungent terebinth, of olive and of bay. And there were junipers and myrtles and thymes that grew in bushes, or with their woody creeping stems mantled in deep tapestries the hidden stones. Sages of many kinds putting forth blue flowers, or red, or pale green, and marjorams, and new-sprouting parsleys, and many herbs of forms and scents beyond the garden lore of Sam. The grots and rocky walls were already starred with saxifrages and stonecrops. Primaroles and anemones were awake in the filbert brakes, and asphodel and many lily flowers nodded their half-opened heads in the grass. Deep green grass beside the pools where falling streams halted in cool hollows on their journey down to Anduin. Well, this is a lovely place. Now, northern Ithilien is also where Frodo and Sam encountered Faramir and the Rangers of Ithilien, and where Sam saw the mighty Oliphant. It's also where we'll see Sam's encounter with the dead Southron, but that's something I'll save for Third Age Thursday as we continue our look at the Haradrim there. Two other very significant places in the Lord of the Rings are located in North Ithilien, Henneth Annwn and the Field of Cormallen. But we're short on time, so we'll look at those next week before we move on to South Ithilien to end Series 13. For now, let's take a short walk to the crossroads before we wrap up for the day. After Faramir bade them farewell with the now familiar "go with the goodwill of all good men," Frodo, Sam, and Gollum march south. Towards the end of the next day, we get another vivid description of the landscape. As the third stage of their day's march drew on and afternoon waned, the forest opened out, and the trees became larger and more scattered. Great ilexes of huge girth stood dark and solemn in wide glades, with here and there among them hoary ash trees and giant oaks just putting out their brown-green buds. About them lay long lawns of green grass, dappled with celandine and anemones, white and blue, now folded for sleep. And there were acres populous with the leaves of woodland hyacinths. Already their sleek bell stems were thrusting through the mold. But of course, there's one more moment to read, and that's their arrival at the crossroads on the following day. As furtively as scouts within the encampment of their enemies, they crept down onto the road and stole along its westward edge under the stony bank, gray as the stones themselves and soft-footed as hunting cats. At length they reached the trees and found that they stood in a great roofless ring, open in the middle to the somber sky, and the spaces between their immense boles were like the great dark arches of some ruined hall. In the very center, 4 ways met. Behind them lay the road to the Morannon. Before them, it ran out again upon its long journey south. To their right, the road from Old Osgiliath came climbing up, and, crossing, passed out eastward into darkness, the 4th way, the road they were to take. Standing there for a moment filled with dread, Frodo became aware that a light was shining. He saw it glowing on Sam's face beside him. Turning towards it, he saw, beyond an arch of boughs, the road to Osgiliath running almost as straight as a ribbon, down into the west. There, far away, beyond sad Gondor, now overwhelmed in shade, the sun was sinking, finding at last the hem of the great slow-rolling pall of cloud, and falling in an ominous fire towards the yet unsullied sea. The brief glow fell upon a huge sitting figure, still and solemn as the great stone kings of Argonath. The years had gnawed it, and violent hands had maimed it. Its head was gone, and in its place was set in mockery a round, rough-hewn stone, rudely painted by savage hands in the likeness of a grinning face with one large red eye in the midst of its forehead. Upon its knees and mighty chair, and all about the pedestal, were idle scrawls mixed with the foul symbols that the maggot folk of Mordor used. Suddenly, caught by the level beams, Frodo saw the old king's head. It was lying rolled away by the roadside. "Look, Sam!" he cried, startled into speech. "Look! The king has got a crown again." The eyes were hollow, and the carven beard was broken, but about the high, stern forehead there was a coronal of silver and gold. A trailing plant with flowers like small white stars had bound itself across the brows as if in reverence for the fallen king, and in the crevices of his stony hair yellow stonecrop gleamed. "They cannot conquer forever," said Frodo. And folks, that wraps it up for this week's rather long Middle-earth Map Monday. We'll visit Henneth Annwn and the Field of Cormallen next week. Now, a big thank you to those of you who support the TTT on Patreon. Your support gives me what I need to create these episodes. Thank you. If you're not yet supporting the show, please consider visiting patreon.com/Tolkien Times. And then everybody join me again tomorrow on today's Tolkien Times as we continue in the revised letters on Tolkien Tuesdays. You know the routine by now. Subscribe to the show in your podcast apps or to the channel here on YouTube, and be sure you're following @PrancingPonyPod on social media. Finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.